In the opening scene, we see the bubbly, beautiful city as Christmas lights shine through the night. Guests are seen moving into the restaurant and activities are on the high, as orders are flying around, keeping the chef on her feet while she prepares customers' orders. Grace Cook is a pro chef, or better still, a culinary workaholic. She praises her ability to use cheese liberally, causing her colleague and friend to laugh at her self-proclaimed legendary ability. The oven's alarm goes off. Upon checking, they find out the Brussels sprouts are burnt. Her boss, Silas, walks in requesting to know why the Brussels sprout, which is supposed to be green, looks black. Grace takes responsibility as the head chef, and also appeasing him with another delicacy she just finished preparing. Her plan works and he accepts the dish while walking away. One of the sous chefs brings her ringing phone over to her. She receives the call immediately, smiling and engaging her uncle, Neil, and his wife, Trish, over the phone and chatting about her success, Christmas, and their winery. After the call with her family, Grace starts cleaning up and a sous chef comes requesting her opinion on what would be best to serve some tables. Silas quickly hushes him up, which gets Grace suspicious. She wonders who is at table 4. Grace is stunned to find out that Delaney Fox, who is a Michelin star critic, is around. She feels like the opportunity is a Super Bowl, so she has to get that star. Silas doesn't want her to find out, so it wouldn't distract her, but she leaves him standing there. Silas introduces Grace to Delaney Fox, as Grace herself does the serving, intending to sweep Delaney off her feet with her choice of delicacies and drinks. But Delaney doesn't seem like she wants to be impressed. She simply reveals to Grace that she has been on her radar, and she waves both of them off. Later on, Grace stares at a romantic couple lost in her world, when Silas disrupts, saying it could be her someday. She objects, revealing that her vision board is too engaged to handle a handsome distraction. She speaks about Delaney's countenance and Silas urges her to just let things be. On other matters, Grace still feels like she should have torched the tart she served Delaney. Later, on her way home, Grace meets Silas, who is sitting just by the door, and they engage in a little conversation about wines and winery. Silas reminds her he believes in her and her abilities before bidding her goodnight. Upon getting home, she prepares something for herself also, while giving herself the motivation that she is almost there, as she looks at a photograph of her mom and her. The next morning, she wakes up to the review on her phone. She is scared to open it, and when she eventually does, her eyes are wide in shock. Next, she is fully dressed as she runs on trying to get to work while hoping Silas picks up his phone instead of allowing her message to go to his voicemail. The moment she arrives at her workplace, she gives Silas a hard time for not taking her call, and almost immediately, she reads out the bad review she got. Silas encourages her with his story about opening his own place after years of working for someone else. He encourages her to take a few days off to refresh herself. Grace heads to the library, and she sees a group of people paying attention to Asher, a traveling nomad. He tells the people about his new book and they engage him, seeking to know the best time for wine lovers to travel to Greece. She scoffs at his idea about winemaking. Mr. Cardigan turns to see her. They exchange pleasantries as they were once guest readers at Storytime with Santa, which she no longer visits. Mr. Cardigan informs Asher that Grace knows a lot about grapes. Cardigan tries to invite her into the conversation, but she tactfully answers his questions and excuses herself from the gathering. Asher soon brings his discussion to an end as he joins Grace. He introduces himself and she tags him as a self-proclaimed Christmas expert, making a joke out of it. He hands her a book containing his Christmas tours around the world with different families, and she thanks him as she walks away, leaving him perplexed. After her stop at the library, Grace heads straight to her uncle's house. Trish is so excited to see her, and just then, Neil walks in to see his niece. The trio enjoys some little chit-chat, as it has been a while since they had Grace over at their place for the festive season. Neil takes her in to help her settle in before the happy hour time. In the next scene, Grace takes a walk around the house. Felicity, her friend the cafe manager, drives in calling out to her, and the ladies run to hug each other in excitement. Felicity briefs her on the low turn-up at the cafe. Grace, her uncle, and his wife are hanging decorations on the Christmas tree when Neil notices something seems off with his niece. He probes and Grace reveals the other reason she is with family is because of an unpleasant review she got from a top food critic. Neil is saddened and wishes for exact revenge, so he requests the critic's name, to cyberbully the person who slandered his perfect niece. They encourage her to get over the bad comment. Trish notices that someone is driving into their house. Minutes later, the door opens to Rita Birds, who happens to be the head of the Winemakers Association. She walks through the house and Trish introduces the two ladies to each other. Rita suggests they take a walk upon finding out their winery B&B has only had a handful of patronizers. Meanwhile, she sees potential in the business. Later on, Felicity joins Grace on the balcony, watching as the others move around the property. She wonders why Rita is there, and Felicity reveals that she bids on a winery and is looking to expand her empire. Grace does not want to believe that her aunt and uncle want to sell their property. In the next scene, Felicity and Grace soon start decorating the Christmas tree. She reveals that her brother is in town for the festive season. It's been a long time since she had seen him. The doorbell rings and Felicity's brother walks in. Grace is shocked to see that her friend's brother is Asher. Felicity, on the other hand, is surprised to find out they've crossed paths before now. Asher explains how they met when Grace crashed his book-selling signing. Felicity receives the books she ordered for the winery. Outside the apartment, Rita asks about the annual year profit of the winery as well as the amount they can squeeze in a year. Trish informs her the land has been in the family for years, even before it was passed to her and Neil. Rita walks around, looking at the rest of the property, also urging them to sell the place and go see the world. At the cafe, Asher briefs Grace about his love for travel, which he got from his father. The duo continues conversing, getting to know more about each other. Grace pleads with him not to make a story out of her visiting her family for the first time in a while, despite being a workaholic. This is because she just had her fair share of beatdowns and would like to simply spend time with her family. After viewing the property, Rita informs the couple she is willing to buy it if they want to sell it. Trish holds her husband cordially and expresses her excitement about the sales because, with Rita's investment, they can hire someone to assist Felicity with the cafe, as well as sponsor their travel expedition. Still standing there, Felicity, Grace, and Asher join the couple, carrying an empty barrel and a bowl filled with corks to play a game of cork toss. The winner gets to put the star on top of the tree on Christmas Eve. All 5 of them get excited as they play and Grace wins. Neil suggests they eat pizza for the game night happening later, and Felicity offers to get some pizza, taking Grace and Asher with her, while the couple continue tossing the cork. Over at Neil's house, the atmosphere gets filled with their laughter as their voices ring through the night. Asher hopes Grace is thrilled to take over the family business, and her uncle immediately reveals her only mission is to earn a Michelin star, making everyone laugh. Neil thanks Asher for sharing in their family tradition. Felicity accompanies Asher out. She slyly brings up a discussion about Grace on their way out, but Asher reminds her of his issues with relationships due to his constant travels and tours. She walks into her vehicle, leaving him behind as he smiles, staring at Grace through the window. Trish and Neil wonder how just one review from a critic could change everything. Grace reveals her determination to get the star just like her mother wishes. Trish brightens up at the mention of Grace's mom. She quickly excuses herself to hand Grace her mother's cookbook, which she found some time back. At Asher's, he sits on the bed looking through a pamphlet he is holding, and the thought of Grace sweeps through his mind. He drops the pamphlet to look up Grace's name on the internet, reading through the comments and the review from Delaney. The next morning, Grace reads through her mother's cookbook. She ponders on Delaney's review, but she soon lets it go, as she stands up to try out one of the recipes in the cookbook. Asher wakes up to Felicity's call. They talk about Grace's name, which is trending over the internet. He wonders why people take food too seriously. They conclude not to talk about it with Grace because he understands she must be feeling exactly the way he did when he got his first bad review. Grace walks into Felicity's cafe in search of a bottle of Chablis. Felicity quickly ends her call, informing Grace she is also out of stock. Disappointed, Grace suddenly stares towards the board, pinned with many postcards, sent by Asher to his little sister. The pictures are beautiful and she would love to visit some of those places, as they may bring the freedom she so desires. Asher stops at a cafe to grab some drinks for himself, Felicity, and Grace. Rita recognizes him as Felicity's brother, so she engages him in a conversation, hoping he would put in a good word for her to Neil's family. Neil finds the conversation awkward, but he simply entertains her a little. In the next scene, Grace goes in search of Chablis. Samantha, who is so excited to see her, helps to find her ingredients. Unfortunately, the shop is out of stock. Rita waves at them from the glass. Upon seeing her, Samantha shows her a petition to keep the Winemakers Association out of town, because they are only interested in buying thriving businesses. Later, Asher walks into the store almost immediately after Grace steps out. Samantha recognizes him as the writer whose poster she saw at the bookstore. She offers to get him some hotshot European wine. Samantha realizes the wine Grace came in search of is available, so she takes it to Asher so he can pass it to Grace. She asks Asher to tell Grace on her behalf that she will be revealing to everyone that a top chef is in town, so she better get prepared. After the conversation with Samantha, Asher heads to Felicity's cafe to drop off her usual, but he meets her absence. He simply leaves her a note and the drink he got for her. He then heads towards Neil's house, where he meets Grace in the kitchen, actively engaged in her kneading. He hands her the flavorful drink he got specifically for her, also urging her to take a sip. Grace tastes the drink and she is amazed at the mixture of flavors. She continues taking sips as she lists out the flavors her taste buds can decipher, while Asher laughs at how she could easily tell the ingredients apart. Grace gasps, appreciating him as he brings out the wine Samantha sent through him. Asher urges her to put him to work, assuming he is one of her sous chefs, but she refuses, insisting he wouldn't last a day in the kitchen. Also, he doesn't have much time to learn because he will be leaving the next day. The both of them continue chatting while she mixes her ingredients. Asher suggests they go on a wine tour, and then a pyramid tour the next day before he leaves. Grace grabs her jacket, liking the sound of that. As they walk through the vineyard, Grace talks about the difference between grapes, and Asher reveals how envious he is of her having a place she can call home. Unlike him, who travels around. They continue their conversation and Grace asks for the thing he cherishes the most. Asher gives her a compass he got from his father, and the duo switches the conversation to their parents. Soon, Grace excuses herself to go grab some flour from the cafe, before heading to the house. Asher brings out his phone to text his friend and news editor, Rogers. He tells Rogers to shift his flight for just a day. Being someone who knows Asher, Rogers requests to know the lady keeping him behind. Asher laughs and makes an excuse. Grace comes back, carrying the flour in a bowl with both hands, and they start heading towards the house. Suddenly, her apron starts coming off, so Asher rushes to help her fix it properly. In a split second, an emotional wave sweeps through them both. They push their heads close for a kiss, but get interrupted midway by Felicity. Felicity reveals to them that she just saw Rita, and she believes she has an agenda. Asher supports her suspicion, also reporting that Rita is angling to take the winery, based on what Rita said to him earlier. Asher informs Grace that despite being the heir to the winery, signing the documents alone will not keep the winery to her family, unless she relocates from Atlanta down to the country. Grace is overwhelmed with the information she is receiving. However, all she can think about is the Michelin star. Felicity sarcastically suggests the only way they could solve the impending issue is to clone Grace. Asher advises her to consult with her uncle and aunt, hoping they will all figure something out. The next morning at Asher's cabin, he packs up his things preparing to leave. He decides to check his phone and sees a voicemail, inquiring to know where he is, because he missed his flight. Over at the cafe, Neil, Trish, and Felicity sit paying attention to the modifications. Grace is making the list of what they offer. She brings out some unnamed wine she got from the cellar, urging them to dwell on the modifications, while she grabs some napkins from Samantha's shop. On her way to the car, she gets a call from Silas, asking when to expect her back so they can plan their schedule. She requests for a few more days to put things in order, and he decides to just let her enjoy Christmas with her family. He compliments how relaxed she sounds, also wishing her a Merry Christmas before hanging up. At Samantha's shop, Rita receives the goods she bought. She makes her not so funny but awkward jokes about Samantha selling the store before leaving. Samantha informs Asher how intense the wine wackos are becoming, and Asher reveals how Rita tried to get Grace to turn against her family. Grace walks in to hear them talking. Rather than approach them, she decides to eavesdrop on their conversation. She hears Asher talking about how intense and ambitious people are, and she automatically assumes the conversation is about her. She walks out offended, without even hearing the part where Asher requests Samantha to get the best cheese for fondue, so he can give it to Grace when she makes her family's special recipe. Asher opens the door to the cafe. He sees Grace and he shows her the cheese he got, but Grace responds to him in a way he doesn't quite understand. Grace confesses to hearing him vent to Samantha about how she hopes for an opportunity for something that it isn't. Asher calmly reveals the conversation was about Rita and not her. She apologizes and explains the reason she thought so is because people always think her to be delusional, simply because she wants a Michelin star. They talk over the misunderstanding and Asher holds her hands, encouraging her to be the best she can be. Later at night, Asher and Grace present the Christmas wreath and a dish prepared by Grace. They all applaud the chef's masterpiece as they dig in. Trish compliments Asher for shifting his departure, and he confesses to liking the place. She announces a new family tradition, requesting that they review their highs and lows for the year. Grace decides to go first and she talks about how she blew up her chance at reaching the Michelin star. Later, Trish announces that the meteor shower is about to begin, and they all hurry up to go watch it outside. They all sit in an open-air space staring at the sky. Grace sees the North Star and urges them to make a wish. Asher then tells her a story of how his parents met, when his dad wandered across the ocean to England, carrying only a compass along with him. The next day, Trish and Neil dress up to go visit the city and Trish suggests they prepare the big dinner party. Grace loves the idea of offering to debut a new tasting menu, and Trish suggests it will be a good opportunity to reopen the cafe and invite all their friends and family. As the couple turn to head out, Grace is amazed at how long they were together before they knew they were meant to be together. From the window where Grace is sitting, she sees a car drive into the property, and it turns out to be Rita and a lawyer, who reveals they are there for an appraisal of the property. Grace quickly reminds them the land has been in her family for over 5 generations, and they are not willing to sell, since their wine still makes heat waves in the market. Rita doesn't get what she wants, so she opts to leave, but Samantha calls her to invite her to the dinner they will be hosting, to celebrate the success of their business. At Asher's, he does some research about Rita and he suddenly picks up his phone to call Rogers. He drops a message for him to reach out, stating he got something big he would need to run by him. Over at Neil's, while Grace is cooking, she sees Felicity from the window cleaning and dancing in the yard. It amazes her and she suddenly gets an idea of the name to give one of the unnamed wines. The next day, Asher visits the cafe to see Neil, decorating the Christmas trees with lights. Asher wonders why Neil wants a winery. Neil confesses he just wanted a simple life. The conversation soon extends to what led to Grace's mother's sickness, her demise, and how Grace started living with them when she was 8. Soon after, they all sit outside by a little bonfire. Asher thanks them for sharing their traditions with him. He reveals that they will be trying out a family tradition of his, hence, they will write a letter to Santa and toss the letter into the fire. As it burns, the smell will take their wishes to the North Pole. Everyone scribbles their wishes on a piece of paper, ready to throw it in. Neil confesses he would like to have Asher around some other time. Grace hands a present to Asher, hoping it will remind him of them, but he assures her that he cannot forget them. Minutes later he gets into a cab, and throughout the ride, he is in deep thoughts. The next morning, Grace reveals an idea she has for the menu later at night to Neil and Trish, who are impressed. It's time for the party and guests soon start arriving. Rita arrives at the venue but, rather than entering inside, she decides to spy from a distance until a dog barks and she goes running off. A Christmas melody plays softly in the background of the party, and Grace lifts her head from what she is preparing. When she lifts her head, she sees Asher walking towards her. She embraces him and he reveals that his next assignment is complicated, and he prefers simple. Also, on his way to London, he realizes she will need a sous chef. This makes her smile. When it's time for Grace, she confesses she is nervous and at the same time, she is not. Meanwhile, Asher is terrified because he has never worked in a commercial kitchen. Their responses make them laugh. Grace reminds him of when they first met, and the discussion about how Italians open a new batch of wine on Christmas Eve to check its fermentation. She requests he give her some second and she will be right back. She soon comes back with a bottle of Grace's special blend. Upon opening the bottle, the smell of fermentation hits their nose so bad and they laugh at the disappointment. Just then, Neil comes to tell them it's time. Grace gets ready and Neil quietly slips his compass into her apron's pocket. Neil gives a welcome speech to the audience, also attributing the reopening of their cafe to Grace. Grace appreciates the opportunity to cook for them as they debut their new zesty wine she named Felicity Raspberry, after Felicity. Felicity didn't see that coming. Grace continues introducing the recipes she has prepared for everyone. While the party is ongoing, Grace gets a call from Silas, informing her that Delaney will be coming back to their restaurant the day after Christmas. Asher steps out to call Rogers, and Rogers complains of not being able to reach him. He informs Asher that the story he gave him is legit, as they are blowing the roof off that particular story. He thanks Asher, who reveals that he has a pitch a bit bigger than a story for him. In the morning, Asher runs towards where Grace's car is packed, to see that she is about to leave. He hands her a lucky apron reminding her that he's got her back. Grace feels reassured and wraps her arms around him in an embrace. They bid each other a Merry Christmas as she set out for her journey. Grace gets back to the restaurant in Atlanta. She looks ready to get her Michelin star. She immediately enters the kitchen to prepare one of the recipes from her mom's cookbook. She makes one for her team to taste and give her feedback, so she would know if it's worth a Michelin star. The sous chefs compliment the dish, qualifying it for an A+. She decides to give it a try with Delaney, so she prepares some more. After her finishing touches are done, she beckons Silas to deliver the dish. Delaney takes a spoonful into her mouth. She smiles as she relishes the taste of the delicacy. Minutes later she requests Silas to call Grace. Meanwhile, Grace finds Asher's compass in her apron pocket. She holds it staring at the object. In the next scene, Grace drives back to the country with a broad smile on her face as she listens to the broadcast on the radio. She arrives at the cafe to see Asher about to leave. She shows him the compass and confesses to him that contrary to what he said about the compass being a bit off, it led her right to where she wanted to be, to a place where she could make the recipes she loved, her family, and the people she loved. Asher also reveals he told his editor he will be stepping back from all the tours, for the sake of other things he has to explore. A soft melodious tune plays as the two look deep into each other's eyes lovingly. Grace mentions that she does need a sous chef even though he doesn't have any experience. They hold each other in an embrace while kissing. Asher hands her the flight ticket Italy, the one she got for them. She looks at the ticket with amazement. She didn't see it coming at all. Asher reminds her she once said fall is the best time to visit Italy. She rushes to kiss him because he gave her an opportunity she didn't realize she needed. With a beautiful and broad smile, she agrees that it is indeed a perfect time to go.